Hello, my dear friends. We have an esteemed guest today, Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Hello, Dr. Tharoor. Let's settle one thing quickly. How do I address you? Should I call you Dr. Shashi, Dr. Tharoor?
You can call me anything you like.
You know what? One thing I do not want to call you as sir because it reminds us of the British Raj. Not only that, he would be unhappy. PG Woodhouse would be unhappy because
And I would be unhappy too. No, just call me
sir. He will say, "Sir, it's just meant for Jeeves." And
You can call me Shashi and I'll call you Jay.
okay, awesome, Shashi. So here we are with Shashi. He's not here as a parliamentarian or as a diplomat, but like you and me, he's here with us as a devout fan of cricket. I don't know how many of you have watched or heard him talk about cricket, but I'm astounded at the passion he has for the game and the encyclopedic knowledge he brings into the conversation about the cricket playing nations, the teams, the players, even the scorecards and all the minute trivia. Today, we are going to talk about primarily the India-Pakistan test history. I found some new footage of the 1979 series, which has a much better picture quality than the one that I had posted before. So I requested Shashi to come and talk about this series as well as the history of cricket between the two countries. Shashi Tharoor does not need an introduction, but I'm not sure how many of you know me and my work. I think it's important because I want to acknowledge his support, his help for this channel when it had copyright issues. So my name is Galagali and I live in California. About a couple of years back, there were wildfires, the worst ever, not far from where we live, and it was ravaging and it was coming very close to our towns. And at that point, we were even thinking of evacuating. Amongst all my personal belongings, the one thing that mattered close to my heart, if at all I was allowed to carry one thing, it would have been this. So this folder has a collection of cricket match footage. Every one of those, the entire collection filmed in India during the years 1948 to 1983. So here we are, literally, I'm holding the visual artifacts of our country's rich cricketing history. It has some epic moments like India's first test victory in 52, Commonwealth's visit in 48, and a footage of legends like C.K. Naidu, Subhash Gupte, and debut matches of Vishwanath, then Chandra, Bedi, Prasanna. It ends with the 1983 Indira Gandhi's reception to the World Cup heroes. So that's the treasure I have. And I started making this publicly available and it became popular. I never realized the crisis that I would end up with. In a matter of a few months, I was struck by a copyright violation by the very department from whom I had legally procured this footage. I tried to make my case. It went nowhere. I didn't know anyone whom to ask. So finally, it was Shashi who came to my rescue. And he didn't know me, and that's the part which really touched me. He saw my email, thanks to PG Woodhouse, who put us in touch. He complimented my work, and he laid out a plan of action. So in the next 3 months, he reasoned with the bureaucrats in the I&B ministry. He even wrote to the cabinet minister, Prakash Javadekar, sent them multiple reminders. So at the end of a 3-month deliberate efforts by our dear Shashi Tharoor, we had our channel back. So my channel, your favorite channel, owes its rebirth to the efforts of Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Thank you, Shashi, for your support.
My pleasure, Jay, and thank you for all the work you do really out of the love of the game. It's really wonderful.
Thank you very much. We are going to talk about the history of India-Pakistan matches, but before we get there, let's begin at the beginning. Shashi, how old were you when you first fell in love with cricket?
Well, I mean, I think every Indian child falls in love with cricket by playing it in the corridor of the flat at home or downstairs if you have a building with enough space to play cricket. So that I did. But I first saw quality cricket when my father took me off when I was just 7 years old to watch a day of the India-England Test match, 1964 in the Brabant Stadium in Bombay, as it then was. And that was an incredible experience because, the start of the match, Budhi Kunderan opened the batting for us.
Budhi.
And Budhi hit a six very early on in the innings, which landed practically at my feet. I was in a good seat in the Bombay Gymkhana stands. And there it was, the ball landed. And then within a few minutes, he tried another similar lofted shot, and it landed just short of the boundary for a four. And, in no time, he was 16 not out. And then he went for another big hit off the fastest bowler in the world, Price. And the ball just steepled up, high, 1,000 feet high up in the air. And as it was going up, he was running for the other end. The ball came down, was caught by Fred Titmus at mid-off. And Kunderan, having seen that he was out, continued running, hurled his bat up in the air, gave a wild war whoop, caught the bat as it came down and ran onto the pavilion. You can imagine it was enthralling for a 7-year-old kid. And I was absolutely captivated. And I think I was hooked to cricket because of Budhi Kunderan. Thereafter, I was fortunate to watch more matches in the Brabant Stadium in Bombay, including the Australian tour the following year, the West Indies tour in 66, 67, which saw the Bombay Test saw the debut of Clive Lloyd, who I remember.
I have the clip. I have a clip of that match.
78 and 87, and was an incredible fielder at slip or gully. And also the debut in that match of Wadekar, who failed. He just made 4 or 8 or something like that. And a really magnificent innings by Kunderan, most of which I missed because I was visiting my grandfather in hospital at that time. All of these memories never go away. We left Bombay in 69, so I missed the New Zealand Test match of that season. But then in the following years, managed to watch some cricket at the Eden Gardens in Calcutta. And of course, whenever one couldn't be at a match, one followed it on radio. Radio commentary was the way to go in those days. And I stayed hooked. In 1975, I got a scholarship to go to the States, where not only was there no cricket, and of course no cricket on television or on radio, but there was simply not even a shortwave radio available for love or for money. The only radios available at Radio Shack in those days were either FM or AM, or if you were so wealthy you could get FM and AM, and that was about it. There was no shortwave. So it became you had to finally go to a specialized shop, a Sony, for a small fortune, which as a student I couldn't afford, so it was only after that. So while I was a student, I remember waiting for the British newspapers to arrive at the Fletcher School library, sometimes a week after the publication date, to find out what happened in the test match a week before. That's how I followed cricket from 75 to 77. Then I managed to acquire a shortwave radio, especially when I joined the UN, of course. It was suddenly affordable. And I used to follow cricket news on the sort of static-ridden BBC shortwave broadcast. But you had to tune in at the exact time. I think there was a show called Sports Roundup, which came just 3 times a day. And if you happened to miss it by 1 minute, you might have missed the cricket news and they're talking about boxing or something, which I had no interest in. But so it was very challenging and frustrating. And, very many of my friends of that vintage who went to countries like America, barbaric places where cricket wasn't played in those days. Civilization hadn't struck yet.
Not anymore.
I know, now it's a different story. I'm just saying in those days,
yes,
many of my friends simply lost interest because they just couldn't keep up with the sport. In my case, it had the opposite effect. It sharpened my passion for the game. That deprivation, the keen edge of deprivation, made me really obsessed with trying to find out what was happening. And can you imagine when I finally got a job with the UN, the first posting was in Geneva, where there was no cricket either. But there it was, by then, television and videos had been invented, and my father very graciously used to make videotapes for me at home and send me. There were no highlights in those days, so you would get, 5.5 hours of cricket whenever it was broadcast on a series of videos, and find a friend who was willing to travel and give them. And so it went. I mean, I must say that as far as I'm concerned, all these different kinds of ways of watching have been immensely made easier by crickinfo.com on the internet, yes, and YouTube, of course, and videos that one can find of old matches, like Galigali's YouTube.
Thank you. So we'll get to the part about cricket commentary, and which meant so much to our generation people. So before that, I have a surprise for you, and I'd like you to share. Let me share the screen. This is your Budi Kunderan, like flinging his bat up in the air and catching it back.
Oh,
yeah. Let me share it's a very short clip, and it is not all that clear, but it is what it is. Here we go. This footage I dedicated to the women and children in the audience in the early 60s. And soon they were eagerly following their newfound heroes who brought spontaneity to the game. Salim Durrani, Budi Kunderan, Jaisimha, and eventually Pataudi. Kunderan also enthralled the hearts of many a kid with his famous habit of hurling the bat skyward and catching it by the handle on his way back to the pavilion.
So this is not as exciting as what
I know. All right.
He's running and he ran.
Oh yeah, running. Okay.
On the way down and back on the way down.
Yeah, that running part is missing here. All right. maybe I'll find something in due time. All right.
Great, thank you, Jay. But that's very nice. I mean, frankly, it brings back memories. What a fabulous. I think in today's era, he would have been an absolute world-class T20 player. But in those days, there was no T20. There was not even any one-day cricket. So he just missed his era, because he was a very attractive, dashing, right, aggressive player who had to ply his trade in an era of Test cricket where many people thought that he was too reckless to be able to be persistent with. So in that Bombay Test, in the second innings, he made, in the Bombay Test against the West Indies, in the second innings, he made 79, having been demoted to number 8. And that 79 was made against the incredible pace of Wes Hall and Charlie Griffith. And it was done at some breakneck speed. I don't think in those days they used to count the number of balls. It was in minutes. But he did it in about under a couple of hours. And earlier in the tour, before the tour that I watched of the Englishman, in the 62 tour, 61, 62, he had made 192 opening the batting.
Wow.
In less than a day. It was the most incredible knock. I think 102 in what must have been about 150 or 60 balls in a test match. So it really was extraordinary. He was a player of extraordinary quality who never got a chance to depict the best of himself in the formats that would have really suited him.
So, which Ranji team did you support growing up? Considering that you are from Kerala.
When you're a small kid, you support the team of the city you're living in. So I was a Bombay team supporter.
Okay.
And that wasn't hard in those days, because of the 11 players in the Bombay team, about 6 or 7 used to play for India. So, but some of the others, because all the local cricket, the schools cricket and so on, was so very popular and widely reported, that even some of the schoolboy cricketers became stars for some of us. I remember Sunil Gavaskar and Ramesh Nagdev were both school and college cricketers who made a lot of runs at that level. Nagdev then migrated to Canada, I think, and played cricket for Canada, which couldn't have done him any good. But Gavaskar, of course,
I had not heard of Nagdev.
Made his debut for Bombay and failed in both innings, and was dropped and never picked again for another year. So it was really quite amazing when you think about how few were the opportunities for cricketers in those days, and how intense was the competition for a team like Bombay. The other team I was very fond of was Rajasthan. They had people like Salim Durrani, who was everyone's a favorite because, again, he was such a mercurial, temperamental, and attractive player. And there was also Raj Singh, Dungar, who was later more famous as a cricket administrator, but he was this amiable, slightly roly-poly captain who bowled very effective medium pace and batted low down in the order. And there was a chap called Kailash Gatani, who again, didn't have the career that he deserved, but who was a very good opening bowler for Rajasthan and no mean wielder of the bat at number 9. So you had players like that in the Ranji teams, and I remember watching Wadekar's 323 against Mysore at the Brabant Stadium, 67, I think it was.
I think I have the
schoolboy.
That. I'm going to post this shortly.
Oh, really? It was an amazing innings because Mysore had both Prasanna and Chandrasekhar and were captained by the redoubtable Subramaniam, who was a very effective medium-pace bowler and middle-order bat. Subramaniam, I think, only played 1 or 2 tests for India on the Indian tour of Australia in 68-69. But in this match, it was quite extraordinary. They had they had an opening batsman and wicketkeeper who was also very good. So it was not a bad side at all. But Gavaskar's 323, Wadekar's 323 had to be seen to be believed. He could do no wrong. Every ball was going to the boundary. And it was the thing that you'll never see again in the Ranji Trophy was the entire stadium was full. There wasn't a seat to be found. And everyone cheering a Ranji Trophy match, just extraordinary. And it was with such memories that I took my kids growing up in America to a Ranji Trophy match at the Eden Gardens in the early 90s. And it was a horrific experience because there were more people on the ground playing the match than there were in the audience watching it. I think literally there were 7 people in the entire Eden Gardens watching a match between Bengal and Orissa. And my children were just so disappointed because they had been taken by me to see the Yankees at Yankee Stadium. And I said, watch cricket. And I wrote an article, I remember, I think it was in the Times of India, after watching that match, saying how much India and Indian cricket could learn from American baseball. And what was amusing was that about 15 years later, when the IPL was invented, that's exactly what they did. They started borrowing some of the fan-stimulating tricks from American baseball, the sort of all
the cheerleaders they're called here.
Absolutely. So,
and
anyway, quite amazing.
Tell us about the cricket commentary. The important, especially for the millennial and the Gen Z generation, they are not able to. They struggle to relate to the nostalgic warmth the cricket commentary would bring to our generation folks.
Because, people have to understand, either you went to the ground to see the match or you imagined it in your head while listening to the radio. That was literally the only choice. Most of India didn't have television. There was television in Bombay beg your pardon, there was television in Delhi up to 1973 was the only city that had television. It was black and white, and what is more, it showed mainly farming programs and so on, very occasional, I think, news once a day and that sort of stuff. It really wasn't compelling viewing, and they hardly ever showed any cricket. If you wanted to visually see the match, it would be a week or 2 after the match was over. When you went to see a movie in a movie theater, the films division would show half a minute clip in the news. And I think you've got some of those as well.
That's the collection I have.
So that's how I used to. So when a match was going on, if you were not on the ground or in a different city from the one you were in, what you would do, because you had no other choice, was to imagine it. And if the commentator was good, it could be really interesting because you could actually, let his words draw a picture in your mind.
Absolutely.
If the commentator wasn't very good and was just sort of giving a boring recitation of the bare facts, then you were left on your own. So you had fairly colorful commentators. Was it Melville de Mello? Was it Anthony de Mello? There was a de Mello who was rather good. Pearson Surita was another one.
How about Bobby Talyar Khan? Have you heard? Bobby?
Yes, AFS Talyar Khan. Bobby Talyar Khan. He was one of the better ones.
Who was your favorite?
All I can say is it wasn't Busy. Busy was really not a good commentator.
Yeah.
He was one of those who really, something would happen and he would say, "Oh my God, oh," Oh, and then you would be left wondering for a good half a minute, sort of what happened? How did he hit a six? What happened? Did somebody hit him on the head? The commentator was really not up to it. But some of the others I thought were rather good. And what is more, as I said, because we were so reliant on them to keep us imagining the match, that this visual description was very important. Then, of course, the international commentators, when India was playing England in England, those days English commentators are very much better, of course, than ours. And similarly, the Australian commentators, when India toured Australia in 67, 68, I remember listening to those matches, and they didn't hesitate to give opinions, which I think Indian commentators were a little nervous about giving. So, for example, I remember Alan McGilvray, the Australian commentator, describing one of my favorite players, Jaisimha, who had been left out of the tour and then flown in, landed on the morning of the match or the night just before the match, and was thrust into the test team and made 74 and 101 not out in that match. And with such consummate ease, fluency, and confidence, despite jet lag and everything else, that Alan McGilvray said, I cannot understand why the Indian selectors would have left this player out from the touring squad. And, no Indian commentator would have had the courage to make that comment. So some of those things were also quite interesting for us in those days.
I'm going to give you an interesting challenge. So I will lay out a bare bones skeleton of a scene that I want you to commentate in two ways. One, with your favorite commentator. And then the second one is using the Tharoorian English, which has become all popular. Now, let me lay out the sequence, Shashi. So it is, you're going to watch it in the footage I'm uploading along with this interview. It's Majid Khan is actually facing Ghauri, and he's caught behind by Kirmani. And then he does not wait for the umpire to raise his finger. He starts walking back and being a thorough gentleman that he was said to be. So here we go. We can fill up the details of who was in the slip, the gully, mid-off, whatever.
All right, let's watch.
I'm going to overlay the audience and the claps and all that once the recording is over. Here we go.
Well, I can't see anything so far.
No. I'm not going to show it. You have to imagine that.
I'm sorry.
No,
I have to imagine the whole thing.
Yeah, the clip will follow. The clip is much later. Yeah.
But if I say, Ghauri comes in left arm over the wicket and he actually goes around the wicket, then what happens?
No, that's totally fine. It's more like a hypothetical situation. Because the clip is barely like 2 seconds. So even if I were to show, you will be like, what am I to do next about?
Okay. Gerson Ghauri comes in, bowls left arm around the wicket to Majid Khan. And of course, the ball has just absolutely clipped the edge of his bat, goes to Kirmani, who catches it and puts it up in the air. And before the umpire can even raise his finger, Majid Khan, ever the gentleman, has walked off without a backward glance.
Lovely. Now let's do the Tharoorian English version.
No, that's Tharoorian English. That's the way I speak.
Oh, come on. Okay, fair enough.
In fact, one of the things that I used to enjoy in commentary was, of course, additional details. So, if depending on, if the commentator was knowledgeable, he would tell us that Ghauri used to bowl both left arm medium fast as well as left arm spin, depending on the occasion. And he helped Kapil Dev win the famous test against Australia in 81, 82, was it 82, 83, when he took the first 3 wickets, I think, and Kapil, who had a bad back or something, came in and took 5. But Ghauri actually took a couple of wickets bowling spin as well. So really, it was quite extraordinary. Anyway, and Kirmani was a really good keeper. I think people had not realized how very good he was. First of all, he was a member of the greatest Indian schoolboys team ever. We follow under-19 cricket now with newfound enthusiasm. When I was a kid, we used to follow Indian schoolboys who were then sent off on tours to England and played against London schoolboys. And I remember the 1967 tour. India had gone to England and got clobbered, the adults. The kids, however, went there and won every match they played. And the Indian schoolboys team included people like Eknath Solkar, Saeed Kirmani, and a prodigy called Surinder Amarnath. There was one match when they managed to, I think there was a follow-on for the London schoolboys. They bowled them out. There was some literally time for 1 over or 2 overs left, and they needed to make a fairly low total. The first wicket fell. Surinder Amarnath came in. 3 balls left in the match, 12 runs needed.
Mm-hmm.
On the that's right. When 3 balls were left and 12 runs needed, on the first of the 3 balls, the batsman got out. Amarnath then came in. The light was apparently very gloomy. People expecting the batsman to peel against the light. Amarnath came in and hit each of those last 2 balls for a 6.
Wow!
And won the match for Indian schoolboys. And I remember telling the story because I heard about this, read about it in the newspapers, and then just a couple of days ago in the IPL, Tewatia did the same thing by hitting 2 sixes for Gujarat Titans against whoever it was, and pulling off an astonishing victory in a match that right till then they seem to have lost. So there are these great moments, and Surinder, I think, was another wasted talent who could have had a much greater career than he ended up actually having.
A question I had was, if you were to go back in time and if you would like to take one of the cricketing personalities for a cup of coffee or chai, who would that be? And what?
Well, I actually have had a chai with a childhood hero, and that was the Nawab Pataudi.
Okay. Tell us more about it.
I was able to, when I was visiting Delhi from my days in the UN, I had a mutual friend, Amrit Mathur, who was junior to me at St. Stephen's College, and he took me to Pataudi's home. And we had a lovely cup of tea, went on for about an hour and a half talking about all sorts of things to do with his era in cricket, as well as his own views about various things. And it would have been, I would guess, sometime very early in the century or late in the 90s, possibly very early this century, maybe 2001, 2, thereabouts. And I found it absolutely delightful because he's such a knowledgeable, articulate conversationalist and witty and so on. I've also subsequently had not just tea, but a couple of dinners and dinners actually, 2 or 3, with Abbas Ali Baig. And of course, I asked him about some of those favorite moments, because he was again somebody who was part of legend in Indian cricketing lore. First of all, because of the extraordinary circumstances of his debut. He was a student at Oxford University when the Indian team came to England in 1959. No one had ever heard of him. He hadn't played for any Ranji side or anything like that. He was just a student. But in those days in Britain, the student teams, Oxford and Cambridge, had first-class status. So he was playing first-class cricket in England and scoring centuries at will. And India was losing every test, and sometimes humiliatingly. That 59 tour was the one in which we lost 1 test match by scoring, I think, totals in the 50s in both innings, including 4 wickets down for 0 at the start of the Leeds Test, if I remember right. So it was a terrible tour. And Trevor Bailey, who had recently retired and had a newspaper column, wrote a column for which the editors cleverly gave the headline, "Don't be vague, ask for Baig." There was a whiskey ad at that time for "Don't be vague, ask for Haig." So they said, "Don't be vague, ask for Baig." And the Indian selectors somehow showed the flexibility and the imagination that they invited the student called Abbas Ali Baig, who was not in the Indian touring team, had never played first-class cricket in India, but had played in England, to turn out for them in a match against Middlesex. In those days, between every test match, there were at least 1 or 2 games against county sides and full-strength county sides, because there were no other distractions like one-day games and so on. So Baig came in and made, I think, 112 against Middlesex in the county game, and they simply couldn't keep him out of the test side. So he made his debut at number 3 in the following test match and scored a century on debut. Wow. It was a romantic tale that hardly anyone could have believed. It was right out of a schoolboy fantasy. It actually happened to this young student. And what is more, to a side which had a number of famous stalwarts, people like Manjrekar, Umrigar, Pankaj Roy, and so on, were playing for that side. And while they were failing, here was this kid who hadn't played first-class cricket in India coming in and scoring a century on debut. He continued to have a few very good seasons, but sadly faded away. Never scored another century. But there was another great episode in his life when at some point, within a year or two of this debut, he was playing a test match in Bombay. And he'd made, I think, a 50 odd, 55 or something like that. And he was coming back to the pavilion, and a rather beautiful young lady ran out of the pavilion and kissed him right in front of everybody, which in India, as you know, is special. It doesn't happen that often, that easily. So that was really quite a remarkable moment.
Now we'll get to the main topic of today's conversation. My dear friends, to boot, Shashi Tharoor has written this book, 60 Years of India-Pakistan Cricket. And I read this cover to cover, and along the way had to pick up several dozens of new words, and I had to look up the dictionary. Great effort, Shashi Tharoor. And can you tell us how you chose this title, Shadows Across the Playing Field? What shadows are we talking about?
I was reading Ramachandra Guha's book about cricket, and there was this particular phrase in it about there being shadows across the playing field. So I took it from that book. It's a very fine book on cricket called, Corner of a Forgotten Field or something. It was basically, again, his title is based from a work of literature, a famous poem.
Yeah, it is this one. Corner of a Foreign Field.
That's the one. And in that you'll find the phrase, shadows across the playing field, which of course was particularly relevant because of the fact that I was publishing this book in 2009 when the horrors of 26/11 had just shattered any hope of normal relations with India and Pakistan, let alone cricketing relations.
So I have this footage, 1979, which has a better picture quality. And tell us about, how do you want to start? Do you want to start with the 1952, the origins of India-Pakistan cricket history, and segue to 79? Or do you want to go back?
I don't think we have the time for that. It's very late in India.
I know. So let's keep it brief. So tell us about the beginning, and then we'll come to we'll spend more time towards the 1970s because that's where all the action is happening.
Well, I should say that the 1970s, we had played no matches against Pakistan since 1962, and there was a major hiatus, largely because the previous test matches had been deeply unsuccessful for the simple reason that both sides were too afraid to lose. In the first few series we played, it was much more exciting cricket, but the last few series we played were very boring draws, with an average of 1.5, 2 runs per over being scored. No side were willing to take any risks because it was too much of prestige involved on both sides' part, and they just couldn't manage to make the cricket interesting. And then, of course, political tensions also came in. 65 war, 71 war. So from 62, when we played a series against Pakistan, all the way to 77, there was no cricket. It was only when in 77 normal political relations and diplomatic relations were being restored that we had a tour of Pakistan captained by the Mathura Bishan Singh Bedi. We didn't do terribly well. We lost. But at the end of the day, what matters is that despite losing, we had restored amicable relations. And then we started touring each other practically every year. I think from 77, 78 to, if I'm not mistaken, 84, 85, or maybe even a bit later. Every single year, we used to exchange cricket tours. And there were, of course, test matches. One-day cricket had been recently invented. Pakistan was much better at it than us. But there were some one-day matches thrown in as well. But the test matches are what counted. And Pakistan at that point usually got the better of us. Now, but in 79, when they toured India, we got the better of them. We won that series. What was the footage you were going to show us, Chair?
We're going to watch the Bangalore test match. I can play it now, or once the recording's over, I'll put that towards the end, and then I'll upload it on YouTube, whichever way you want. So before we get there, in the interest of time, I just want you to reflect on two things. One is the camaraderie that existed between the two teams, the two countries.
Right.
And then the second thing is what I call the intertwined identities. Like when Lala went there, and he was so popular that he could have won an election, they say. And here in India, they were ready to pay 500 rupees ticket in black for a ticket which was 50 rupees just to watch Hanif Mohammed in Bombay. So
Now, you should remember, of course, that Bangalore, I think, was the first test of the tour, and it was also drawn. So it wasn't a terribly exciting match in itself. Any particular reason you're showing this footage?
Oh, the Bangalore match was because that's the first one I have, and
Okay. So
yeah,
it began with a bang when Gabri got Majid Khan out, I think, in the first over.
yeah. You
And
have
thereafter, practically every Pakistani batsman made runs. They made 400 odd, and we replied with 400 odd. Again, every batsman made runs. I think Mudassar Nazar was the only centurion of that match. And Pakistan barely got going in the second innings before we ran out of time. So it was not, but it was a 6-match test series, and I guess each side was getting the measure of the other at that time.
Pakistan's new captain Asif Iqbal wins the toss and elects to bat, notwithstanding the wet weather and the damp wicket. Kapil to Majid, Majid plays defensively forward. Ghavi to Majid, got behind the kidman. An appeal, Majid does not pay for the umpire. What a gentlemanly gesture. A nervous debutant Rajabini to Mudassar Nazar. Mudassar clips him square. 2 runs. Zahir Abbas drives Dilip Doshi through extra cover. 4 runs. Shivlal Yadav to Javed Miadad. Miadad lifts him hard and high over wide mid-off. Mudassar Nazar anchoring the innings with his customary pluck and patience, batting 446 minutes for his 126 runs. After a rapid-fire 76 in just 2.5 overs, Miadad is out, LBW Doshi. Unhappy with umpire Swarup Kishan's verdict. Asif Iqbal made 55 sparkling runs, hooks Kapil Dev through square leg for what looks like a boundary. Imran Khan is out, caught Vishwanath at backward square leg, bowled Yadav for 6. The tail-enders, putting 83 runs, shut the door on India, Bari remaining not out with 49. Pakistan declared their innings at 431 for 9. Imran Khan round the wicket to Chetan Chauhan. Chauhan cuts him and the ball races to the boundary. Abdul Qadir to Sunil Gavaskar. Gavaskar drives it on the offside for what looks like a 4. Qadir this time to Vishwanath. A magnificent cover drive. The two brothers-in-law lifting the gloom in an otherwise dreary match. Imran Khan comes in and Yashpal guides him through gully. Should be a 4. Debutant Ehtashamuddin to Vishwanath. Vishwanath is gone. Caught behind brilliantly by Wasim Bari. Imran Khan to Roger Binny. Binny hooks him through mid-wicket for a 4. Debutant Binny batting more confidently than we saw him bowling earlier. Majid to Kapil Dev, a glorious cover drive. Majid filling the role of off-spinner with neither the craft nor the practice to be of any force. Kidmani pushes Ehtashamuddin to mid-off, no runs. Anand Shetalwar on the radio. Dilip Doshi is bowled by Imran Khan for a duck. India all out for 416. Pakistan begins the formality of the second innings. Majid Khan cuts Khawi through gully for what looks like a 4. Gavaskar bowling a leg spinner to Zahir Abbas. Short, and Zahir hammers it respectfully through extra cover. Pakistan 108 for 2, match feeders to a draw.
It was a very, very interesting Pakistani side because they had all the greats of that era. They had Majid Khan and Mudassar opening, Zahir Abbas, Javed Miandad, Wasim Raja. The captain of that tour was Asif Iqbal, who actually had grown up as an Indian, had even played for South Zone. His uncle had been the captain of India, Ghulam Ahmed. Was migrated to Pakistan in the mid-60s and was immediately picked for the national side. And then came to fame, I think, scoring a century in England in either the 67 tour or the 71 tour, I can't remember. But he scored a century early on in his career, batting very low down the order, batting at number 9 or something like that. And then he got the captaincy for this tour. Imran was the fast bowler, Wasim Bari, perhaps their greatest ever wicketkeeper, Abdul Qadir, the famous leg spinner, Iqbal Qasim, the left-arm spinner. In fact, the only one in that side who was never considered a great of Pakistan cricket was Ehtashamuddin, who was a fast bowler. But the others were just incredible legends of the game in Pakistan. And India had a pretty strong side too. Gavaskar, Vengsarkar, Vishwanath, Yashpal Sharma, Kirmani, Kapil Dev and Gavri opening the bowling. Dilip Doshi bowling spin, left arm spin, and Shivlal Yadav bowling off spin. Roger Binney was there as an all-rounder at that time. And of course, these were well-matched sides. So one can say that, each side making 400 odd and being unable to close was not entirely surprising. But as the series wore on, we got the better of them, if I remember right.
So one final question. If you are the chairman of the selection committee, this is late 70s or mid 70s. So and if there was no partition, we were like one undivided country. So name your 11.
It would have been very difficult to name 11 because who would you have left out? I think the Pakistani bowlers would have all got in, but would have had to accommodate at least Kapil. And arguably, I would have put Doshi ahead of Iqbal Qasim. But the truth is that if you look at it now objectively, there was an incredible luxury on the batting front. Imagine, who do you leave out when you have Zahir Abbas, Javed Miandad, Majid Khan, the whole lot of them for Pakistan, and we had Gavaskar, we had Vengsarkar, we had Vishwanath. I don't think you could have created 11. I mean, maybe partition at least saved cricket.
we would have been tragedies
of humanity. But thank you, Jay. It's been great talking to you.
Excellent.
I wish you really all the very best, and I look forward to seeing this. Good talking to you. Pleasure reliving those moments. Take care.